Good afternoon. We will be starting in 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
I love that. I know. I know. That's what I'm talking about. They need to run the country. Sunday morning football.
just about.
I'm talking to I don't know. I always have this problem. The podium's
You might
bigger
just have
than-
to take the mic.
I know. Well, I could do it. I could sit down too. Well, it's tough because you have your paper, that you're.
Right,
So
right.
you take them, and then how do you advance the slides? When they,
There is a clicker.
There's a
right
clicker,
here.
so
Yeah.
I've had to do this like various ways.
Okay.
Bored, like seriously.
I see people working your way back to your seats. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, thank you so much. Welcome. Good afternoon. My name is Michael Reeves. I work in the Office of Diversity Programs here on campus. Are you happy to be here? Woo! It's the 13th annual. It's pretty exciting. So my job is to introduce the next panel. This is panel number 2, a film discussion on the Black press soldiers without swords and interception. This panel will discuss Stanley Nelson's award-winning documentary film, The Black Press Soldiers Without Swords, and Interception, Jane Kennedy, American Sportscaster, a film by Sophia Songhai. Nelson's film outlines the history of the U.S. Black press from its founding in 1827, tracing its role in Great Migration, 2 World Wars, and Songhai's short documentary highlights Jane Kennedy's rise from beauty queen to NFL sportscasters, the newspaper as a voice for unity and hope and alternative perspectives to mainstream media, and a powerful tool for promoting independent and critical thought among various African American communities also will be discussed. Our moderator for today is Dr. Loretta Brady from St. Anselm College. She is not nervous and she will cut you off if you are speaking too long. So at this time, Dr. Brady.
Well, I don't know if it's entirely true that I'm not nervous. However, I'm very glad to be here and very excited for this panel. Each of our presenters will share their film. Each of them said that the film piece itself is about 15 minutes. I want to provide an opportunity for group questions, but I also want to provide an opportunity to see the conversation between these 2 pieces. And perhaps identify some of those gaps that Dr. Thorne shared earlier. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce from the program Dr. Khanzad and Ms. Songhai. I'll read their bios, and then we'll start with Dr. Khanzad's work. So Delia Khanzad is a professor of English, Cinema Studies and Women's Studies at the University of New Hampshire. She's the author of Ethnic Modernisms by Palgrave Macmillan in 2002 and Hollywood's Hawaii, Race, Nation, and War by Rutgers University Press in 2017. The first full-length study of the film industry's intense engagement with the Pacific region from 1898 to present. Her new book highlights films that mirror the cultural and political climate of the country over more than a century, from the era of US imperialism through Jim Crow racial segregation, the attack on Pearl Harbor in World War II, the Civil Rights Movement, the contemporary articulation of consumer and leisure culture, as well as the buildup of the modern military-industrial complex. Focusing on important cultural questions pertaining to race, nationhood, and war, the book offers a unique view of Hollywood film produced about the national periphery for mainland US audiences. Hollywood's Hawaii presents a history of cinema that examines Hawaii and the Pacific and its representations on film in the context of colonialism, war, Orientalism, occupation, military buildup, and entertainment. Sophia Songhai is a film director, Emmy Award-winning television producer, and broadcast journalist. A Philadelphia native, she trained with playwright Ntozake Shange, Sankofa director Haley Jarima, film director Spike Lee. Songhai's films Ladylike and In Silent Spaces both follow Black female protagonists and explore themes of sisterhood, mother-child relationships, religion, spirituality, and the male gaze. Ladylike was incorporated into middle school curriculum to teach religious tolerance and interpretations of the feminine ideal. Songhai also has worked as a television commentator for CNN's Aaron Burnett Out Front, discussing topics concerning racial profiling, the George Zimmerman trial, police brutality, and the impact of the murder of Trayvon Martin. Since 2014, she has covered international news as a TV anchor reporter for Arise News and Peace News Network. Songhai is a summa cum laude graduate of Howard University and earned a master's degree at the Tisch School of the Arts at NYU University. Please join me in welcoming both of these presenters, and please, Dr. Consent, join me.
Okay. So I'm here to discuss Stanley Nielsen's 1999 The Black Press, Soldiers Without Swords. It's an award-winning PBS documentary, and it follows the traditional aesthetics and style of the documentary genre, using a narrator, the well-known film and stage actor Joe Morton. It also features talking heads, the experts that come in, usually journalists and their family members, historians and scholars, and it makes good use of archival film footage, photos, songs, and music. Ron Carter, the well-known jazz bassist, composed a lot of it. Where this film truly shines is in its subject matter and the information it delivers. It is one of the few films that looks closely at the Black press, giving a historical overview from the time of its founding in 1829, when Freedom's Journal was started publishing, moving through the Civil War, Reconstruction, World War I, lynching, race riots, the Great Migration, World War II, and the Civil Rights era, which ironically would spell the end of the Black press. So what I want to do is show you this film. Let me move this around. Okay. Let me get this going. Sorry about this. Oh. I have some clips here. I'm streaming it from Canopy, from the UNH Canopy, and I hope it does well. Okay. So this is the beginning of the film.
We never participated in anything that was civic routine. We
this is really nice how he introduces his film, and then he puts all of the various black press headlines on there.
Newspapers were among the strongest institutions in Black America. They helped to create and stabilize communities. They spoke forcefully to the political and economic interests of their readers while employing thousands. Black newspapers provided a forum for debate among African Americans and gave voice to people who were voiceless. With the pen as their weapon, they were soldiers without swords.
Okay, and I'm gonna pause it, and then I'm gonna skip over. Just bear with me. I see. Oh. I can't read the, so small. I'm trying to read that. This is as close as I'm gonna get it.
Black woman by a Negro. It is the race question in the ugliest, vilest, most dangerous aspect. The Negro as a political factor can be controlled, but not a law.
I wanted to show the part right after this.
His lusts. Memphis Commercial, May 17, 1892.
And here's the part about Ida B. Wells.
Editor of another Memphis newspaper, The Free Speech, traveled to South to investigate cases of lynching. The editor was Ida B. Wells. What she found and put into print caused an uproar among white Southerners.
It is a sacred convention that black women can never feel passion of any sort, high or low, for a black man. Unfortunately, facts don't always square with the convention. And then, if the guilty pair are found out, the thing is christened an outrage at once, and the woman is practically forced to join in hounding down the partner of her shame.
On June 4, 1892, while Ida B. Wells was in New York on her first trip north, her paper, Memphis Free Speech, was attacked by a lynch mob.
They actually destroyed this woman.
This is Vernon Jarrett.
And intended to destroy her body, take her life, to the extent that she walked the street with a pistol under her blouse or apron, or, according to legend, 2 pistols on occasion.
Fearing for her life, Wells did not return south for 30 years. She continued her groundbreaking work on the staff of the New York Age.
She really set the stage for a very radical, very activist kind of black journalist. And as a black woman, she was also an inspiration because there were so few African American women who had worked in journalism before. And when they did, it tended to be sort of a social service-oriented journalism, not this sort of powerful, radical, vociferous journalism that said, we won't stand for this, we must do something about the kinds of violence affecting African Americans.
Okay, and I'm going to move it now up. Let's see. This is during the World War II era, where the Double V campaign and how the government looked upon it as seditious. Okay, 106. So. It's the part right after this.
Now, Edgar Hoover
Yeah.
decided that the black press was dangerous to America's well-being in the war, and to get all in his power to accuse them of sedition. Hoover had the presidency, he had the ear of almost every president, and Roosevelt was no exception.
just tell Hoover no. The word no. All he had to do, J. Edgar Hoover, say, what part of no don't you understand?
Frank Bolden was one of the earliest war correspondents.
Select committee of Congress. Frank Bolden, one of the first two African-American war correspondents, was summoned to Washington for his post in Berlin. I just got a notice one day that I was the one in Washington to report on the condition of the troops as regards this double B program that Hoover said was an act of sedition. I only stayed 2 days because when I found out it was superfluous and silly, I didn't want to waste my time. The longer I stayed, the more angry I became with Hoover, and I thought I'd better get out of there before I said something out of turn. Because I have a very short fuse for Neanderthal psychosomatic. He has to also go through the Attorney General of the United States, Francis Biddle. And Francis Biddle and J. Edgar Hoover aren't the buddies that J. Edgar Hoover and Franklin Roosevelt are. In 1942, Hoover presented Attorney General Francis Biddle with lengthy reports on what he saw as seditious activity by the African-American press. He asked Biddle to indict a group of publishers for treason. John Sengstack had become publisher of the Chicago Defender in 1940 after the death of his uncle, Robert S. Adams. Sengstack was alarmed by the growing threat of censorship.
Well, I think Biddle got the information because closed up the black newspapers in this country. And I finally went to Miserable and told her I wanted to see Biddle and talk to him. So in mid-June 1942, John Sengstack, the publisher of the Chicago Defender and the top publisher, if you want to call him, of the black press, came to the Justice Department building in Washington. And he entered a room, Biddle was there, and he was spread out on this paper, where all these black newspapers, Biddle says, see these newspapers, these are hurting the war effort, and if you don't stop writing this stuff, we're going to take some black publishers to court under the espionage act. What are we supposed to do about it? These are facts. And we aren't going to stop. That's what it's all about. That's what the press is all about. Protecting blacks in this country.
You've got to realize what an incredible thing that is for Sengstack to say to Biddle, because Biddle's the Attorney General of the United States, the top law officer. He clearly has the right to take him to court if he wants to.
We have to explain to them what the problem was. And we were citizens like everybody else and wanted to be. They had no problem with it.
Sengstack left the Attorney General's office with an extraordinary agreement. Biddle would not prosecute if the newspapers would not escalate their campaign during the war. Without Biddle being there, Roosevelt would probably succumb to Hoover's request to ban the black press and charge them with sedition. Keep in mind, there were more people in this country against the black press than were for the black press. Many people thought, including some African Americans, thought the time was not right for us to be asking for elimination of second-class citizenship when the country was at war.
Okay.
As the war ended.
Okay. So you can see, let me see here the way let me just try to get this down. Okay. You can see how the black press is presented throughout the film. It follows with this. And I don't think there's been another film that has done this. I was speaking with Jerry Ann, and we were talking about, what film we could use. There are no feature films, and this was the only documentary about the black press. And yet, we can see that the black press, from its inception, functioned as a democratic sphere, and its visionary leaders, which included Frederick Douglass, Ida B. Wells, Robert Abbott, who very much intervened with the Great Migration and all of that, Charlotta Bass, that they were really what you would call public intellectuals, who, as described by Said, are exiled and unsettled visionary leaders who guide and help the communities critically articulate their fears, crises, and anxieties, as well as their hopes and dreams, and thereby provide alternative perspectives of history as well as new stories. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Sophia Songhai, and you are the first people on this earth to see this film. Yes. It's my first audience for this project. I'm a graduate of Howard University Film School as well as NYU Film School. And I am a professor now at Plymouth State University, which is a little up the ways, a little farther north than we currently are, if that's even possible. So I'm going to read you the log line for the film, and then I'm just going to show you the film, so, prepare yourself. I did want to know if there's a way to come turn the lights off. Oh, that you're already there. See, we're here. We're already here. Okay. All right. In 1978, a bronze skin bombshell rocked the world of Sunday morning football. Millions tuned in, but few know the story of the first African-American female sportscaster to demand her airtime on network television. Black, beautiful, and refusing to fumble, Jane Kennedy. She changed the game when she covered the game.
To be a co-anchor on the desk of the Super Bowl is like the crown jewel of broadcasting.
Jane, the fastest woman, has one come across yet?
Yes, Greta White's, and as a matter of fact, her time was a record, and she was one of those people that was the first at ever running a marathon distance.
What a chauvinist I am. What, over 4 hours since this? Of course we've had women come in.
Of course,
Listen,
of course.
When I heard that that CBS was looking for a female to take the desk at the CBS NFL Today to replace Phyllis George,
First week results for 3 or more than 200 NFL rookies.
I just said, God, I'd love to do that job. I mean, it was like, to me, a dream come true.
The new Miss America for 1971, Phyllis George, Miss Texas.
How has it been being the First Lady of the Locker Room and the First Lady of Kentucky?
Coming right at you on the NFL Today.
Barbara Walters was the pioneer in news broadcasting, and I became the pioneer in sports.
I knew that I could do that job. So I asked my agent to submit me, and I said, you gotta put me on. I know I can do this job, you gotta put me on the list. And they refused. They said, no, they're not looking for a black, and they're not looking for a non-journalist. And my parents always raised me to never doubt myself. If you wanna do something, go for it. And if it doesn't work that way, figure out another way to do it.
Intercepted in the end zone, badly underthrown receiver with the Rams, and the key attraction, the New York Giants.
There's no parking at all.
It's changed so much. I haven't been in New York in almost 20 years. Oh, we're in Central Park, right?
Yeah.
Hey, see, I did recognize something. 3 times they submitted a list of 10 people, and 3 times all 10 were rejected. I called the agency back, and they said they're not looking for an African American. So I said, okay, cool. I'll just go out on my own. And so we ended up calling Jim Brown.
There were a couple of people in professional football that did not want me to succeed.
He said, okay, so you got to meet Bob Stenner. He's a field producer for the games. And he says, well, you got to meet George Wallach. He's Bruce Jenner's manager at this time. And so I called George Wallach, and he set up a meeting. I came in. He said, yeah, I think you'd be great on the job. He said, but I tell you what, if you get the job, I want to be your manager. And I said, okay. Once I walked into the studio and I saw what they were probably looking for, and it didn't look anything like me, because everybody that was doing the audition, they were all blonde. And I was the only one. I said, you know, I'm not going to get this job. They're not looking for a black. I'm not going to get this job.
This is CBS.
I got to New York, I went on the audition, and Brent Musburger stood up and said, it's Jane or nobody, and he left the room. The director said Jane or nobody. The producer said Jane or nobody. They showed it to the president of CBS Sports. He said Jane or nobody.
The Dallas Cowboys arrived in New York late yesterday. CBS.
They still didn't hire me, even though everybody said they wanted me, because putting me on the desk meant that they would have an African American,
By commanding 24-0 score, Harold Carmichael's caught 2 touchdowns.
a Caucasian,
Night game, and apparently Robert Newhouse was tipping the offensive.
and an African American.
Late yesterday, CBS had a cassette of Too Tall Jones's bout ready for them to view.
And there was no way they were going to do that. And so they said, how can we get around the fact that we want Jane on the show, but we can't have 2 blacks on the show? We can't have 2 blacks on the show.
The record book of 29 consecutive losses to Chicago Cardinals should not be there.
Having an African American woman on the set for the network was a problem because it was 2 blacks and 1 white. So that was what their fear was, you know. What if the Southern affiliates pulled out? I mean, the show would be dead.
Jimmy was a loner. He was narcissistic, cantankerous. He was a little off the top of his game, not as well connected as he once was.
But they decided to get around the problem of 2 blacks and 1 white. They moved Jimmy the Greek to the desk. So it became a 4-person desk. So it was Jimmy, Irv, Brent, and me. So 2 blacks and 2 whites. And that's how they fixed the problem.
A reporter from WRC-TV was asking questions about Martin Luther King's birthday and the progress blacks have made in society.
No, I don't want to. I don't want to.
Okay.
I let Jimmy speak for himself.
He said that blacks were bred to be superior athletes.
The slave owner would breed his big black to his big woman so that he could have a big black kid, see?
And Snyder said that's why blacks excel over whites in sports.
I didn't know him that well. I only saw him on the set. To me, he was like an angry teddy bear. Nothing made him happy.
The black is a better athlete to begin with because he's been bred to be that way, because of his high thighs and big thighs that goes up into his back.
It goes without saying that his comments do not reflect in any way the thinking or attitudes of the rest of us here at CBS Sports.
And I remember the day that they called, the telephone call, I picked it up, and they said, welcome to the NFL today. And we just started yelling and screaming and jumping up and down and hugging each other. They didn't give me a year contract. They gave me a 6-week contract, trial period. And I said, dang, I'm gonna have to prove myself all over again. CBS Sports Spectacular wanted to be able to get some comments from Muhammad Ali.
Keep your camera moving because I'm kind of fast.
And it wasn't happening. And so I heard all this bickering back and forth, and I said, I can get you an interview. And I called Ali, and I said, you know what? I have the opportunity to do this at CBS, and I got to get an interview with you. He said, sure. He said, I'll leave the key for you. He said, go to my suite immediately after the fight. He said, and I won't go to the ABC interviews. He said, I'll tell them that I need to rush by there, and we'll do a couple of things with you, a couple of minutes with you.
Man, I'm so fast. Last night I cut the light off in my bedroom, hit the switch, was in the bed before the room was dark.
He walked in the door, and he still had his robe and his trunks on, and his sweat's pouring down, and his tapes were still on his hands, and he walked over to the camera, he punches into the lens. He said, I will only do this for my friend Jane.
Patrol in New York. Here's Brent Musburger.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the NFL Today. It's indeed my pleasure today to welcome the newest member of our NFL Today team, Jane Kennedy, who grew up cheering Jim Brown in Cleveland and now lives in Los Angeles wondering what's going on with the Rams.
Jim would like to hear that. First of all, I wanted to thank everybody for just being friends on the show. I'm going to appreciate that a lot.
Monday morning when I got home, they had picked up my contract for the whole year. I knew that getting the job on the NFL Today would make the difference. I had no idea how big that difference was going to be.
Jane was the first African-American co-host of CBS.
The sports anchor.
Yep, sports
yes.
anchor.
Of CBS NFL
NFL Today.
Right.
Yes. She also has a lot of accomplishments that include an Emmy nomination for her work.
I didn't appreciate that I was getting paid $40,000 for a job, to do a job that other people were getting paid in the upper hundreds of thousands, millions, and beyond. I didn't. The only thing that I could credit for that was because I was black. Upwards to 3 and 5 million. It's a shame. You know, the black woman, she's up there, first of all, as a black, she wasn't getting paid, and as a woman, she wasn't getting paid. $40,000 for the whole year for an Emmy Award-winning show. My agent that refused to submit me 3 times, and I had to end up going in and get a manager, they decided that they were supposed to be due their percentage of my $40,000 contract. And so they sued me and they won. So I had to pay my manager, my agent that didn't do anything, publicist, and Uncle Sam. So there wasn't very much left. You know, like if you advocate for yourself, you know, and that's yourself, that's your gender, that's your race, or whatever your identity is, you know, advocate for yourself, but realize that there's a global group of people out there that need you to be their leader as well. When I think about how difficult it was and how challenging it was to just try to maintain your identity.
Jane Kennedy in the mysterious island of beautiful women.
In the movie, my hair is natural and it's, you know, full and everything. The day that we wrapped, very next day I had to fly to Puerto Rico to do the Pan Am Games.
Today here at Guaynabo Coliseum, mainly because the United States team and
I get a memo from CBS the very next day. You cannot wear your hair on the set that way. You need to do your hair. And we're still having that argument today. Black people can't wear their hair natural. And what's wrong with that? So I knew that CBS had the contract to do the Super Bowl for 1980, and I couldn't wait. And they said, we're going to put you up in a helicopter. And every time it got time to throw to what was supposed to be my interview.
Ladies' new comedy, Heaven Can Wait, is chock full of magical moments. Hello.
They said, and now we're going to go to Phyllis George at the I think it was the Gingerbread restaurant.
Easy here at the Gingerbread in the heart of Beverly Hills. What a party, Phyllis!
I tell you, we've had more fun. Of course, Carol Connors owns this place. Joe Namath predicted Pittsburgh to win. Lonnie Anderson of WKRP with us. Tanya Tucker.
With her husband.
And of course, my husband.
What a year he's had. He's had a Super Bowl year of his own.
Well, I guess when you consider marrying Miss America and becoming governor of Kentucky and father child all in 1 year, we have had a Super Bowl year.
I was the governor of Kentucky, had nothing to do with the NFL today. And I was just pissed. I jumped out of the helicopter and Irv Cross was right there. And he just grabbed me and he held me. He said, Jane, there's nothing you can do. He says, nothing you can do. And he said, just don't go there angry.
Let's check now around and see how the fans. Let's go to the Ginger Man and Paul Horney. LA fans have to be happy, Paul.
I want to say it was a couple months later, and a Western Union telegram comes for me, and it said, you're fired. Bob McNulty says to me, Jane, he said, I don't know what's going on, but we've been instructed to cut you out of the show as much as possible. He said, so I've been editing cue cards all week. And I go, oh my God. I just didn't know what to do. I didn't know what I had done wrong. My heart was broken.
Do blondes really have more fun?
CBS fired me for breach of contract and that I was going to be working on a show for the NBC network.
Speak up, America!
And so I gave them the contract that Frank Smith had signed, and they hired me back. And then 2 weeks later, they fired me again.
They're not those words that you use to demean them and to belittle them and to degrade them and to deny them their equal rights.
I decided I was going to hire Gloria Allred, women's rights advocate attorney. And she was just beginning her career. So she stormed into CBS and demanded that they give me my job back. And they did. And they paid me the remainder of my contract. And then they fired me again. And that was it. Fired 3 times within probably a month and a half. And I was gone.
Hi, I'm
Hi, I'm Jane Kennedy, your host for Greatest Sports Legends.
And I'm Jane Kennedy, inviting you to join us for the 1981 Tournament of Roses Parade.
Hi, I'm Jane Kennedy, and I want every one of you out there to love your body.
So what the NFL Today had done,
I love sports,
it just rocketed my career.
but I'd much rather be a participator than a spectator.
In 1984, I was hired to do a Jovan fragrance ad with Billy D. Williams.
Being sexy is an all-day job.
Lee Horsley, I can't remember the blonde. I found out we were all paid the same.
Welcome back to NBA Countdown.
It was so hard to just try to prove that you were worth it.
Game to game, you know, you haven't been sure if it was going to be that sore.
For me to just try to prove that I was equal.
Let's first take a look at Indiana.
I wanted to get paid for doing the same job that everybody else. I wanted to get paid the same.
All right.
That would be a
I would totally understand.
You do the same job.
And be that leader amongst that.
You get the same promotion. Leaders in 2 teams. And you get the same check. I recognize the impact that I had on their careers. They may not. I don't get acknowledged for it, but that's okay. But I know the struggle it took to take that first step. It's never easy to be a pioneer. It's never easy to be the first one.
You can bend but never break me, 'cause it only serves to make me more determined to achieve my final goal. And I'll come back even stronger, not a novice any longer, 'cause you deepen the conviction in my soul. Oh, yes, I am wise, but it's wisdom going to pay. Yeah, yes, I pay the price, but look how much I've gained. If I have to, I can do anything.
I apologize for being out of sync. I'm not sure what happened with that, but. Thank you so much.
Just gonna sit with that work for a minute. All right, that was amazing.
Oh, good. Okay.
That was amazing. I am like so honored to be in the audience of the first viewing of that film. Thank you. So, yeah, that took a lot. And there's so many things I want to dig into there. But before I get to the questions that I want to ask, as you each reflect on the pieces you both just shared, I'd love to hear a comment from each of you about the other, right? And what you see aligning and what you see departing.
Wow. The heroicism. I will say that. It's amazing.
Very moving, yeah. She's moved right now, so she's gonna.
Yeah, I've just said, can you not hear me? Heroicism. Oh.
Just bring it close, yeah.
Okay, heroicism. And that kind of bravery to do all that and forge a place within something that's already established and forge a new place.
Right. And I think with Stanley Nelson's films, I was raised on them. Like they're everything to me. They've given me everything about my understanding of the continuation, that resides in all of us. And so I feel like the Ida B. Wells segment of the film, of everything Stanley Nelson does, right? But especially when she is confronted with a lynch mob. I feel like Jane Kennedy went through that as well in a different way, and in a way that was much more sophisticated than just sort of this,
corporate.
Yes.
A corporate lynching.
And yes, and I mean, when I called her up, I had no idea that she had gone through all that. I thought it was a big victory story. I was like, oh, you were the first one, that's great. She's like, well, let me tell you what happened. And I was like, it was a 5-hour phone conversation. I was bawling throughout. I'm like, then they did that to you? They did what? How could, like the whole time. And then when I finally did the first edit, I was bawling at the credits, and I called her up and I'm like, I just thank you for doing this, because I'm an anchor woman as well. Everything that she went through, I've had some version of that, especially the hair thing. That happens all the time. And Ida B. Wells is that first person who stood in front of the world and risked her life. And I feel like Jane kicked the door in, like, you know, with stilettos on, you know what I mean? Like that type of thing. And I think those two women are so brave, and they do it in a world that is a very male world. I mean, Ida B. Wells was defending men. And Jane Kennedy was in a male-dominated industry, and was already termed a beauty queen, and she had to go and say that, hey, I have a brain, and I also know I have a brain for football. That's a big deal. So yeah.
One of the things that struck me about Nelson's piece, I think it was early in, I took some notes, so pardon me. One of the interviewees says, "We didn't try to be objective because we didn't see the white press being objective. We took a position." I'm curious in each of your work how you see the position of the Black press and Black correspondents within that, and how it shifts when Black is taken off press.
Okay. Yeah. Objective. Okay. Well, I think it is important as a journalist to be objective. I've had to interview people that I don't have anything in common with at all, totally disagree with them, but I have to put that journalist hat on and see it from their side. And I've even had people call my news director and say, this is the best reporter we've ever had, because they think I agree with them. I don't, but at the moment they thought that I did. So I think it's very important to always remain objective. I do, however, recognize that when you're Black, your story is not told for such a long period of time. And as a journalist, you're a historian. That's really what you are. So, it's that whole when the rabbit's got the gun thing, right? Like, it's like this is your chance when you're the people who have been assailed to tell your story from your perspective. And like they said in your film as well, the idea that in the Black press, which I was also raised on the Bay State banner, and every moment in my family's life has been documented by Black press, from Jet Magazine to Ebony and Essence, and all at BET and many other things. I feel like that's where you have to show the balanced side of the story. So it's not about not being objective, it's about giving this balance to the seesaw, because oftentimes we are only portrayed as criminals.
I would agree with that. Objective is a context. And today with representation, we hold up this sort of so-called objectivity, and Toni Morrison has pointed out, if you're well-bred, you don't bring up the question of race. You become generous and liberal, and you do that, and you overlook race, when actually it forms she was talking about American literature. It forms the basis of a lot of American literature. And so this whole thing with objectivity can sometimes be a norm, a standard that you're upholding. And so I think this balance, you need to realize when that objectivity is failing you. There's certain things where you do want to be so-called objective, but there's no set standard, and who gets to say what's objective? That's where I think the power representation comes into play. Who gets to say, this is objective, that's biased?
Right.
In both films, and I'm thinking in Nelson's film about, is it Frank or Fred Bolin, who's the correspondent, who's...
Frank, I think his name is Frank.
At one point he shares that he knew he needed to leave before he spoke his mind. And Jane describes the rage. I'm kind of thinking back to that first panel, the rage she felt recognizing that, her aerial interview shot was being cut in favor of, a shot at a bar with a Kentucky governor. And so I'm thinking about the Black press, I'm thinking about Black correspondents, and I'm thinking about rage, and, kind of riffing off this idea of objectivity. How do you see that being navigated? And I'm curious from Jane's perspective if she shared with you whether she felt she navigated that effectively for herself or not.
Sure. So Jane Kennedy is also my cousin. She's my mom's first cousin. And so there was this legend of her in my family for so long. And, we would have these stacks of Jet magazines, and they were sacred. Like the Jane Kennedy Jet magazines, like, no, they're in like a glass box. You can't touch them, right? And so for a long time, even though she was in my family, I was used to seeing the smiling Jane Kennedy and like the beautiful Jane Kennedy, all these things that were very superficial, and saw her at the family reunions and, corresponded with her very large family. But then when I was interviewing her, I wanted, after interviewing her, I wanted to explain what the toll that it takes on the person who decides to be the first, because they're so insistent on showing the brave front, because they know that no one else in their generation, is prepared to do what they're about to do. But what happens when they have, that door closes and they are in their hotel room, in their house, whatever, and the weight of all of those body shots, right? Those kidney shots, those, shots to the liver, all those body shots that you can't see because they're hidden under your clothes. What happens? And so she kept initially trying to explain, like, oh no, Sophia, we have to say that we were winners. We're winners. Like, we always have to. I'm like, no, I don't want to show that you're a winner all the time. I want to show what it feels like to be inside of that. I want to see what that feels like. And so eventually, I actually had to interview her about several components several times. And like the part with the Jovan commercial where she finally, says that she was paid the same amount. We interviewed her about that like 4 times, and she's like, and then I was paid the same amount. And then eventually she was like, I was paid the same amount. Like, that's all I ever wanted, was just to have my work, my experience, my, presence to be validated in every way it can be on the same level. And it was like, she actually went off on that on her own towards the end of the interview. And it was like the weight of the day, as you interview someone over time, they kind of like, let it all hang out eventually, right? So, and she went from being a person who was always about the strong front to eventually showing me what I wanted, which was, what does that feel like to be the first? I mean, if you look at, say, like Dr. King, his autopsy, he has the body of someone decades older than him, because of the stress that he was under. Yeah. And I think, we're very ready to validate the pain of other people, but other groups of people, but for Black women, that's like a part of, we're always applauded for that, and yet we have coronary artery issue where, our bodies are suffering. And, Jane Kennedy has struggled with her weight after her, her earlier career, but I think that that's a reflection of, how she was able to, for a moment while she was having her kids, finally deal with the emotional impact. And so I was on the phone with her, and she said, Sophia, I don't like what I look like right now. And I'm like, do you know what you look like to us? Do you know what you do for us? Like, you have no idea. Forget whatever you're looking at in the mirror. Like, you know what you feel inside of me as a woman. Like, I felt invincible every time I would go to the editing room after just hearing, snippets that aren't even on this video. Like, there's so many components, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you're like my new motivational speaker. I can't believe I slept on you all these years. Like, she's just incredible. And I think the anger and the rage she always held together, and it has a toll. And that's another part of the film I really want to. I want Black women and people, period, but especially Black women to, strong is is definitely a compliment, but it can also be a way for people to dismiss you and your pain, and say that your pain does not. Strong. Yeah, it's like, do we have shoulders to go to? Like, we're the shoulders we lean on. So, yeah, I definitely saw that throughout.
One of the fascinating parts of your film was, they'd show her in such a happy way, always a winner. And that was one of the things with especially television. You're presented as that, a winner, happy, and you had no idea what's going on behind the scenes. And when you hear about what's going on behind the scenes, it makes you angry that they're not as happy as they should be, and that, with their smiles and everything is perfect. And that's one of the things about celebrityhood. I think that, and when you're in the press, and especially today with this celebrityhood, I think it becomes quite dangerous. You project that perfect life, and now we're in Twitter, social media, Instagram. Everyone's doing these perfect, perfect vacations.
Filters.
Yeah, doing their faces and all this kind of, where you're always perfect, and it's hiding everything.
Both of these works really reveal the line that Black press and Black correspondents are navigating around and through whiteness. And so in each of the stories, there's a moment of permission being granted, of a gate not being closed because of the intervention or the intercession of a white individual. And so I'm wondering if each of you might speak to how that makes you think about the work of journalism and of the Black press, and the resilience that it shows in and around that kind of white gatekeeping.
Well, I think one of the most important parts about the Jane Kennedy film is that they were prepared for a Barbara Walters and a Phyllis George, right? America was ready for that, but no one even invited, and would refuse to let her audition, just refuse to let her audition. She's paying them. They get a percentage of everything that she makes, and they refuse to send her off to this audition on the sole basis that she's Black. And so I feel like that, component always said something to me, that when people are like, well, is it the time? I think they mentioned that in your film as well. It's like, this isn't the time yet. And it's like, well, how long is it going to be before, I'm on AARP, the cover of AARP magazine. And so it's always this idea of, Dr. King's Why We Can't Wait. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. That's why that title is so important. And it's like you have to decide that change is inevitable, one, but am I going to be at the mercy of it, or am I going to be at the helm of it? And Jane decided she was going to be at the helm of that change, and she was going to usher it in. And she was like a Blaxploitation actress. That was the level of power that she had in 1976. She had the Miss Ohio USA win, first Black woman to win that, and that was like 8 years before. So she wasn't coming from this big lofty position of power. And I remember I was reading some article, and underneath her picture, to reduce her new job, they said Jane Kennedy likes pancakes. And that's like what they said underneath her caption, to make it seem like she was more of just like a bubblehead. So she had to constantly fight to explain to people that, no, I know the game. And one year, the year before this Super Bowl, she was the only sportscaster to predict the team that was going to win. Everyone else was going, I think it was for the Steelers, and she said it was the Buccaneers, and the Buccaneers won. And they held a parade in her honor. That's in the longer version of the film, but they held a parade in her honor because she was the only sportscaster to predict that. So, that's the thing about it, is that people are oftentimes ready for sometimes a Black man or a white woman before a Black woman. That's kind of like, whoa, whoa. Like, let's not get ahead of ourselves. And she was like, but I'm already here.
Catch up.
What was fascinating with Nelson's documentary is that, especially towards the end, in the demise, how the civil rights movement itself brought up the demise of the Black press, precisely because then white presses started hiring Black photographers, Black journalists, and other Black workers, and it created, and also even Black press, then bigger ads such as GM or Ford started advertising with them, and they had to then cut down and couldn't say what they really wanted to say. They couldn't be radical. And so something was lost. And I do think, one of those things, and this is why I love Edward Said when he talks about, he says the public intellectual has to be outside, an exile. And it's precisely at that moment when they moved into and became part of with the white press that they lost. They lost that radical element that was there, and so to battle that's a whole different, can of worms.
Yeah. So here in that last answer, we're navigating between that first panel and thinking through, media ad buys, right, and who gets to say what, where, and who has influence over the page. I want to open up for questions. I know that we have some roving microphones available, so questions that the audience may have?
Good afternoon. Thank you both so very much for your presentations. Particularly with the Jane Kennedy film, I love sports, and I noticed today that particularly with the NBA and the NFL, the female sportscasters, and people can wear whatever type of clothing they want to wear, but I noticed that the female sportscasters show a lot more skin than the male sportscasters. And I think about body imaging and so forth. Could you give some insight on that? Because with Jane Kennedy, it seemed as if she was clothed, just in a normal, quote unquote, normal way, along with the male casters. But what about today's time and the dress and the way that some of the female sportscasters are dressed?
Well, I mean, most people who watch ESPN and Sports Center and all, they're guys, so it's an entertainment field. I know with Jane, when she was a sportscaster, she often wore pants. It was so hard to get her into anything that wasn't like the most comfortable thing. I'm like, you cannot wear like sweatpants to this interview. Like, you cannot be that comfortable. She's like, but I'm just playing Jane, Sophia. I'm just playing Jane. I'm like, no, come on. We got to dress you up. We got to be glamorous. She's like, no, we're talking about sports. We're talking about sports, Sophia, okay? Like, we're not talking about glamour. I'm like, okay, all right, well, we're going to get you into something but that's her personality. And she really is like, she was raised in sports. She played everything you can imagine. She was track and field. She played basketball. Like, she is a proper athlete. And so I think a lot of women who become sportscasters now, they are people who come from a lot of times a sports background, and they have to get media training, to learn how to be sportscasters because their natural instinct is to be an athlete. And so, yeah, I mean, one of the fastest ways to get a woman, ready for television is to have her look like, at least eye candy. As an anchor woman, that's a big part. They don't genuinely care as much about what you know as much as what you look like. So they do care about what you know right afterwards, but first is what you look like. So I think that's just kind of come along. It's just a part of the business in the sense that you're on TV, you're getting paid to be on TV. You need to be appealing. Even the guys have to be appealing. Like, we spray their hair with like a balding, the men's baldings, but we have like hairspray for that. There's all kinds of tricks. Like, they wear makeup too, so don't think they're getting away with anything. Even guys have to be shiny and polished on television. So I don't really find it to be a problem, but I think the sportscasters are similar to weathercasters as well as anchor women. We just kind of wear jewel colors, sheath dresses. It's like our uniform. So my closet's filled with them, trust me. It's like a normal thing. So, yeah. Oh.
One here, and then Dennis, up here, yeah. Thank you.
I'm just curious, I may have missed it, but what were the reasons CBS gave to Jane for firing her repeatedly?
So Jane Kennedy got an opportunity to work on a show called Speak Up America on NBC, and she went to the head of CBS and said, hey, can I work both shows? And he said, that's fine. She's like, can I get that in writing? Oh, sorry. Can I get that in writing? I think this is right. Sounding a little echoey.
That was smart of her.
Yes, and so, but they didn't know that. So when they fired, they were looking for a reason to get rid of her to bring Phyllis George back. That was the real reason, right? So they were just clamoring, trying to figure out something to, pin it on. And so she already had clearance to work on Speak Up America. However, they wanted to bring Phyllis George back because her husband, the governor of Kentucky, would then give them, hopefully, the opportunity to do the Kentucky Derby. So they wanted to bring her back so that they could get the benefit of her husband's, new governor position, and they needed Jane gone. And so they just made up a reason trying to blame it on her, vintage gaslighting. And then at the end of that day, she ended up not really being a fireable person. That's why she was hired and fired 3 separate times. And when Gloria already got the remainder of her contract, it was like $2,000. So, yeah, it was essentially an internship. They were giving her this, moderately paid internship, and everyone else is getting paid the equivalent of millions of dollars or $1 million in 1978 money. So, yeah. And Phyllis George and Irv Cross were getting paid $300,000, while Jane was getting paid 40, minus to $16,000.
All right, yes, thank you.
Objective.
Yeah, no, that made me cry.
I've noticed that the PBS NewsHour has a really good representation of races and backgrounds in their anchors and in their reporter essayists. CNN, I think, is ahead of MSNBC in terms of panels that always have people who are not white on them. But for anchors of these shows, it's less, they have them for on the weekend, but not during the weekdays. On the local broadcasts, I watch Boston TV because I live in Exeter. It's still white anchors and black sports people. And I wonder if you have any comment about how that's going, because I also regret that in this country we now have black channels and white channels where blacks have token roles on the programs, and black channels where whites get to be the villain in a lot of shows, and that's probably fair, but you know, I think we need to do better than that. And in the United Kingdom, they really are mixing it up to a point where, as an American, I go, how could this be? A little town with a black pub owner and all this stuff, and they've adopted a policy of, it doesn't matter if it makes sense, just show it, show it, show it, and it'll become acceptable.
Well, I'm more in cinema, and so I can kind of add, there is a rule, an unspoken rule. It's starting to be broken, but the unspoken rule is the rule of three. And the rule of three is that if there are more than 3 black people in the film, in lead roles, it becomes a black film. And therefore, it won't attract mainstream. It means niche market. And so, you know, this is why you have Denzel Washington, and he's surrounded with whites. Samuel L., surrounded by whites. Will Smith, surrounded by whites. Eddie Murphy, surrounded by whites. And so, you know, this is that's the rule. It is starting to be broken slowly, but you know, you don't know if that's going to continue. Think of Ryan Coogler's films. You know, he doesn't have that rule of 3. Fruitvale Station, and then of course Apollo Creed, which has, you know, Sly Stallone is in it, but still nevertheless it has, you know, other people. And of course Black Panther, which has now sold over a billion profit, you know, around the world. And so that is, you know, it's being broken. And you think of films like Moonlight, even Hidden Figures, films like that, they're starting to change. Ava DuVernay's films, they're starting to change. But, you know, we don't know where it goes, but there is that rule of 3, and when you look, you know, it's fascinating. Samuel L. Jackson is in the book, the Guinness Book of World Records, as being the richest man for the, I think he's been eclipsed recently, but for about 10 years, he led the pack, made much, much more than Brad Pitt. And that is fascinating, but look at how he's presented in his films. He's alone. And if you have like a big film like Independence Day with Will Smith, they tend, and he has a, what does he have in there? A girlfriend who is a stripper.
Vivica Fox,
a stripper, you know, and he's an Air Force captain and was going to save the world, but she's a stripper, and they make the family look dysfunctional and lessen that family.
So, I think building off what you're saying, it's not even just about having a black face, it's about the depiction of that black face. And so whether that is in film or it's also in television news, a lot of times, you know, that's where you're going to end up with tokenism, because they're just like, you're a black face, come on up, black face, and just be a black face and talk and say the things that we need you to say, because where there's still the people who are the marionettes, you know, the puppet masters rather, and you're the, you know, you're the puppet. So it's, I think most black people have experienced that the issue with doing things at, you know, black companies versus white companies, we have the same story over and over again, because it's just very difficult to be a token, and you know, end up, all the things you want to say, you type that email and then you delete it, you know, like right before you send it out. So I definitely think that in television news, I know when I worked at a TV station in Missouri, I was the only black woman in the whole building, and I remember I covered stories about black people, and they said, you know, they only let one work there at a time. That's exactly what he said. And my news director, she was like, you know, you look just like Halle Berry. You just look just like, I'm like, I don't. Like, I don't like Halle Berry, but thank you so much. And she was like, well, you know, I just think Halle Berry, she's a pretty African-American woman. Like, and that was it. It was like, if you couldn't hit the Halle Berry standard, you will never be hired at this TV station. And I started going through tapes at the station where I worked, and every woman who worked there before me looked just like me, identical to me. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, it was some kind of horror film where I was looking at all the possible people who could play me. I'm like, you know. But I mean, she had in her mind the standard for a black woman. She was, she is a white woman, but she was color struck. And, the level of black that you had to be could not pass a certain level of, butterscotch or whatever, you want to call this situation I'm working with in the middle of November, New Hampshire. And I think the same thing, I think is also important with Jane's film is the idea that Jane, I remember telling the hairdresser, I'm like, I really need her hair to be natural. Like, I need her to have the, poofy. She straightened the heck out there. I was like, what are you doing? And so I thought at the end I was really upset because she didn't have natural hair, but really I was glad in the end, because a lot of times people think that very fair-skinned black people don't experience this, and that's not a part of their, experience of facing racism. They're let into the door perhaps earlier, but they're left in the vestibule, in the cold vestibule, right? And so it's an experience a lot of people don't get, and actually Oprah, there's a clip where Oprah says to Jane, or says about Jane, she's on the show, and she's like, well, you remember Jane Kennedy? You had to look like Jane Kennedy to be on TV. And she's talking about how Jane must have had this easy breezy life in broadcasting. Little does she know that while Oprah was in Baltimore on People Are Talking and fighting her fight with, relaxers that pulled her hair out and them reducing her to a talk show instead of being a lead anchor, Jane was going through her own fight. On either end of the color spectrum, they were both battling the same monster who recognized that, they created the one-drop rule, and that rule governed all of us on the federal Supreme Court basis, not just in personal interactions, in an institutionalized racism model that Europe doesn't have. And that's the difference between when you see black people in Europe in television versus in America, because we're still dealing with Plessy versus Ferguson, Jim Crow, and the people who were born in both your documentary and my documentary were born when that rule was spelled out very clearly. 3% of African American ancestry makes you black in Virginia. Any discernible recognized, they had it all spelled out in legal terms. This is not Jethro and his pickup truck. This is the Supreme Court of the United States. You dropped a bomb on me is Black Wall Street, Oklahoma, Tulsa, Oklahoma. That's not outside terrorists, that's the United States government. So we're really dealing with, we need like 100 years after 1968 to fix any of that. And Europe never had an institutionalized racism model that governed you from in utero to the cradle, to the grave, to the afterlife, okay? They tried to govern every aspect of your mind, body, and spirit, and that's gonna be pervasive in all industries, including broadcasting.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you both. Both of those films are absolutely amazing. I wanted to thank you, first and foremost, for bringing Jane to light for me. I'm a huge sports fan. I have no idea who she was before today. So, I genuinely can't imagine watching sports without Josina Anderson or Jamel Hill. But thinking of that, that kind of ties back to the film you showed. Jamel Hill has been treated some kind of way time and time again, and I'm waiting for the next installment where this ties, to the Jamel Hill documentary, and we unpack all of that, because I think
you're right.
That's a huge problem, because it is directly tied to the history outlined in your film. So I appreciate you for highlighting that.
Thank you. And she said she would be in our documentary as well. So that's the feature length will be a big section of Jamel Hill. Yes.
That's awesome. That's awesome. But my question with that is, the reason the reaction came out with Jamel Hill, her comments on air at one point, also Twitter or wherever it was, social media. The reaction's a result of her being on ESPN, which is a network, I assume, I actually don't know, but I assume is run predominantly by white men.
Most likely, yeah.
So my question is it important today to maintain some sort of separate media, a black media, the way that the first film portrayed, and not. I think that objectivity is a part of the reason, but also just reception, intention, cultural context, I think all comes into play when we're thinking about these things. So I'm just curious, do you think it's important that that there is a black media, a media for each segment of our populations, or is the ideal that we all come to one media that we all agree on, and somehow, maybe not politically, but in some way, as Americans.
Well, I certainly think that, I really don't think in terms of like black and white, I think in more in terms of ideology. So there's lots of people who have high concentrations of melanin but still support white supremacy, and then there's, people, right, very true. And then there's lots of people who should not step out in the sun because they will immediately burn, who are definitely, who've been riders since the jump, So it's like I don't correlate people's mind or philosophy with their biological, presentation on this earth. They had nothing to do with that. They have everything to do with the way that they think. And that has been evident in Ida B. Wells' time and Frederick Douglass's time. I love Frederick Douglass is, oh my goodness. I just read his books like for a whole year, right, back to back. And one of the reasons is because it's dealing with the psychology, right, of what happens to people when you're in that position and what you do about it. So I always think that, we create African Americans, we created our tribes not because of our skin color or because of where we fell in terms of other people's identification of us, but because of what we did about it, right? Like, what do you do when you're in a situation? That's your group. Like the way that you react to being held hostage, the way that you react psychologically, the way that you react in terms of your the next move that you make. And so, when you read like Frederick Douglass's work, everything he says is applicable to right now. There's not one thing I can't apply to my Monday morning when I go back to work and battle the battles I have to fight. So, I think that, to answer your question, when you are an African-American person, it is always important to preserve your voice, and that can't be done when you are underneath someone else's thumb, no matter who that is, and no matter, and so we have so many outlets now. It's endless outlets to have your voice heard and, to have your opinion, your perspective seen. So that's why I went into film. I remember thinking, I should be an actress, and I was like, for what? I'm just gonna be someone else's, I'm gonna act out someone else's vision. I was like, I want my vision and my perception to be something that's marketable, and that's how I ended up in so much student loan debt. But that's exactly why I think it's very important for you to decide not just about we need black-skinned press, we need black conscious press. We need consciousness. That's what, of everything else, there's only 3 ways you can be black, right? Either you have significant amounts of African ancestry from sub-Saharan Africa, right? That's one way. Another way is that people will see you as such, and then they will treat you accordingly in a world where they attack people violently in a violent manner because their perception that you're black. But the third most important one is the black consciousness. That's the one that really matters the most. Colin Kaepernick could be a man who recognizes himself as biracial. He could recognize himself, if he wanted to, as a white man who could pass and cut his hair off and not have cornrows. He can also see himself as a black man. None of those things really mean anything until he decides to make a stand against black people who are not in a position that he's in to say something against police brutality, okay? And he could have said that as a white man, a black man, or a biracial man. It's not about any of those identifiers, it's about his action. His action is what proves his consciousness. And that goes back to Malcolm X and Dr. King, it's about someone's conscious behavior. It's that's what you judge them on, and that's all that really matters. So I would rather see media that's about the consciousness than just the idea of a color being, and then us being a monolith, which will never be, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I think you need both.
Mm-hmm.
You need black press, but you also, you want that where you want to impact the mainstream press and also have your space in there too. So I think, try to have both, but, it's difficult.
So I think we have one more question, and it's over here. Thank you.
I want to thank you for the presentations, showing a balance. I think they're always, until the American character has changed to where deeds, not words, be people's adorning, that you're going to need this for balance, whether it's women, any people of color, because our history has not been good. People come from one continent to a continent of color and do things. But in my experience, almost 87 years on Earth, is that the black press has been not only necessary for informing people, because many white people have read the press, whether it's the Chicago Defender, the Baltimore Afro-American. We used to get all of them delivered to our house, delivered. I grew up in South Bend, Indiana. But I think it was something to really let people of color know you are somebody, you are worthwhile, you have a history. And during the bicentennial, it was the black press that came out and talked about how blacks were very important in the founding of this country and after 200 years, and showing that wig makers, most of the barbers, everybody was black in this country. But I think the most important thing is that during that bicentennial year in 1976, they showed, thanks to the black press calling to attention, historians verified that the overwhelming majority of people of African descent could place their presence in this country prior to 1776, and the overwhelming majority of European Americans could not. So in this present day, when they talk about who is American and who should go back where, then I think and ask the Indian nations of America what they think about who should go back where.
Exactly. Yep. Yes. Thank you. Do you want to close us out with any thoughts?
Good. I really loved your film. I loved it with Jane Kennedy there, and and it brought back all those things from the 70s and 80s, how happy people looked on, where they all looked like winners and they were so perfect. And seeing that and then juxtaposing it with her story and that she's telling it to you, I loved it. I thought it was great.
Well, I definitely would love to know what you all think. This is still a work in progress, so if there's any part of the story that's unclear, please let me know, because I can always go back to the editing room and rearrange that. So I hope to make a feature version of this and have it on a place like Netflix or Amazon Prime or Hulu, and there's much more. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. Thank you for your questions.
All right, let's give it one more hand clap. So this officially closed our panels for the day. Thank you to everyone who's attended. I do have the pleasure of being able to tell you that you have to leave this room. We need to get it ready for the dinner that's happening at 6 p.m. If you're coming back for the dinner, you can start check-in at 5:30 p.m. The doors will not officially open until 6 p.m. So you do have a little bit of time. I also forgot to give you the Wi-Fi password for anyone sticking around. Okay, so if you want the Wi-Fi password, it is Exeter 47. So EXETER 47. And it's a capital E. So Exeter 47. Thank you, and please, if you can get out quickly, that would be great.